Now you'll be so pleased when you see this heading. Keeping it simple. After that presentation, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, it's almost a slight wind back a bit to say, if you're starting at a different starting point, what is it you do? How do you get on the first rung of the ladder? How do you then keep it moving forward from then on? And my background is within service development and service delivery within a community health and care partnership in Scotland. Then moved into the Scottish Government based on some of the experience I'd had about telecare and telehealth development locally, really building on those lessons and that experience which started back in 1998. No, you won't believe that, but that's true, 1998. So, here's a picture of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You know, you hear very often, yeah, impending doom is upon us, we have to change the way that we do services. Oh, what are we going to do about it? And for me, I think this is absolutely the opportunity that many of us have been waiting for on the telecare and telehealth side, in that no one seems to be coming up with any other wonderful, great solutions, and that the use of technology along with other forms of interventions in a kind of thoughtful and targeted way, I think really does offer us the opportunity to do things differently and start to redesign our service delivery models in the way that we undoubtedly have to. And I came across this picture in the Community Care magazine, the online version in December, and I thought, if our existing staff teams are already worried about what technology is going to do for them, a picture like this is really going to scare them. Where a bit of a cross between, I think, Minority Report and the Stepford Wives, it's not something that I think we're really trying to encourage as the vision for how we see it in the future. But looking at where we've come from in Scotland and just kind of acknowledging some of the very practical difficulties that have presented themselves. Although we launched 2 programmes on telehealth and telecare back in 2006, very different approaches were adopted to both programmes, different funding mechanisms, different kinds of support that would be offered, very different approaches to evaluation as well. And that's just reality, you know, that's just where people start out in a very complex system that we have. We also had a large number of very small to medium projects. They tended to be unconnected, even at a local level. Our telecare programme nationally and our telehealth programme were unconnected as well. They just all popped up all over the place. And very difficult, I think, to kind of make those connections at that very early development stage. Loads of confusion around about terminology and accountabilities, and I think that continues now. You know, you hear telepsychiatry, tele this, tele that, tele the next thing, and I agree with Joan that actually when we lose the tele, that's when we've really got success out of this. It just becomes part of what we do. Where we've been very lucky is that there has been huge enthusiasm from practitioners on the ground, from carers, from service users themselves, and very good ministerial support from government as well. And those have continued throughout the span of the programmes. So there's something there that people feel they can engage with and do something about, and that has been sustained, which I think tells us a lot as well. So generally we are regarded in Scotland as making good progress to date. We see all the flaws and the problems with what we're doing, but we're looking at ways in which we can positively overcome those. Progress very quickly. Telecare programme had £20 million development funding associated with it. We used that really as a pump priming mechanism locally to engage with people, to look at the way in which they can roll out their local programmes, and we had one very strange body, me, looking to facilitate across the programme as a whole and trying to work with people at a local level to hear what they needed by way of support and to look at ways in which we could facilitate that process through various networks, etc. So set out at the beginning of the programme, what is it we're actually aiming to do, giving a vision for that and a target in it as well, you know, foundation on which telecare can become a key part of what we're doing in community care services. We outlined a number of specific objectives, and these linked into what we had to do by way of performance indicators within a social care and a health setting already. So it was information that people were already having to collect for other purposes. We weren't creating a big wealth of data that they had to collect alongside it as well, in addition to the very busy jobs that they have on a day-to-day basis. Looked at a range of qualitative and quantitative measures within that as well, and then set about figuring out how we were going to do that. We also had a number of different mechanisms in which to collect information. We were very brave, I think, at the outset, and stupid in many ways in setting out a business case with expectations in it. We had specific targets round about bed days that we thought we could save, which were set by local practitioners. It wasn't something that we created at a central level. It was very, very much based on the kinds of experiences that were already out there, the Northamptonshire projects, the West Lothian project that I was heavily involved in. What is it that they had already done? What kinds of indicators were they looking at already? And what could we then do if we were rolling it out on a national basis? We developed a strategy round about telecare to give direction and support to people. What were the key areas that we felt they were needing to be looking at? But again, that was based on feedback and information coming to us from local practice. We commissioned an evaluation that I made reference to earlier on, in which quarterly returns were provided by partnerships, which were basically just connections. How many connections have you got? What's your client group, what's the kind of age basis on all of that, and again that came from systems and processes that they had. And we also still produce annual progress reports on how we're doing with installations and what kinds of impacts that's having again at a local level. We've also worked with some voluntary organisations, mainly on a basis of them coming to us and saying they're very interested in this agenda. And Carers Scotland were one, I know Carers UK I think are doing a presentation tomorrow. They came to us and said, we're hugely interested in what telecare technologies can do for carers. How can we work with you to get information out there? And again, wonderful that kind of approach was made, and they commissioned research from Leeds University, which is published and out there as well, looking at the impacts on carers, and we've updated our action plan to 2012 for direction as well. So this is the kind of feedback that we're able to put out there. You know, around about 180,000 people had very early kinds of telecare technology, our baseline, the basic community alarm service back in the beginning of the programme. Every single area across Scotland are doing something round about telecare, and there has been nearly 30,000 people who've received a service as a result of the programme rolling out, with a kind of target on the dementia side as well. The spend's always been in arrears, which I suppose shouldn't be a surprise, but has always been roughly about, you know, kind of 2 quarters in arrears in terms of spend, so that even the results that we have today are not the full year as we go forward, so we're updating that at the moment. Now, gross benefits we have identified on the basis of the York evaluation structure at 48 million for the 20 million investment that we've put in, but it is gross benefits. We know that there are other costs that are associated with sustaining people in the community. It wasn't part of the approach that we took, so again, very interested to hear what comes out the whole system demonstrators on that. And as I say, continuing positive feedback. The kinds of figures we produce are these kind of things, which again are telling us where the impacts are actually, even on a kind of direction of travel basis, the kinds of impacts and where in the system those impacts are already happening. So looking at, does it affect how long someone's in hospital and can we get them out quicker? Can we prevent them going in the first place? What about the use of care homes, and have we actually made some sort of impact on those? And you can see some of the figures. Again, the partnerships themselves set out their own expectations about what they were trying to achieve, and you know, some, as you would expect, different varieties of when you put your finger in there and try and calculate what you're going to do over a 4-year period against what you actually really do, and how that informs how you target it into the future as well. We also funded, the kind of funding for the programme went on the basis of around about 88% of the cash that we had went directly out to local partnerships to support their developments. 4% was project management and evaluation, and the remainder went on innovation and integration demonstrators, which were really looking at these specific areas. And the approach that we had was, yes, we want to get technology out there as fast as we possibly can and expand it, because in so doing, we will increase the expertise of our staff, but at the same time, it starts to build up capabilities and capacities in the system. You don't have to buy it in as a service provision, which was very important for us. But the innovation and integration demonstrators were about the kind of sending off the cowboys to find out what's going on over the hill. You know, what's the kind of trends that are coming? What do we need to prepare round about that? How does it affect the system that we're working within as well? So these are the kinds that are here, and colleagues from Lothian are up the back of the room giggling at the pictures, I see. So they've been involved in a monitoring health at home project, basically the home monitoring that was referred to previously that you can talk to as well. Telehealth, again, very different approach there, very much with the Scottish Centre for Telehealth established within Scotland as an advisory board for the NHS and working directly with health boards on what kinds of support they wanted in rolling out their telehealth developments. The expectation was that they fund that from their own telehealth, their own mainstream allocations, so they did not get additional capital funding to pump prime developments in the same way as we did with Telecare. And there's been a more of a mixed pattern of provision and activity, I think, that's been pursued on that front. On the telehealth side, progress, we've got significant stroke management and paediatrics programmes now. Haven't heard a lot about children as we've talked about it today, so again it'll be interesting hearing from others' experiences of the application in a children context. Awareness raising, again at a very early stage initially, quite a lot of that's been now done by the Scottish Centre for Telehealth and moving forward. What's also happened, which structurally has been quite important for us, is that the Scottish Centre for Telehealth has been reviewed in terms of its activities, and they've now moved into NHS 24, which is a very large service delivery vehicle for the NHS and is very technology aware, pushing out that as a mechanism, multi-channels across the board. So again, I think that's been a fairly significant development for us in how we take some of the programmes that have been developing across a national basis. And we've got various networks and kind of facilitation processes behind it, events that we champion as well as we go forward, just to share the learning and probably more importantly get practitioners to speak to each other, because that's been hugely valuable. You know, we come and do presentations and various things about what's going on in the rest of the world, but the most important thing I think for them has been having peer support and actually having someone suggest ways of sorting a problem. You know, haven't been able to do something with falls detectors, oh, don't bother about that, do something else instead. So that's been hugely valuable. SCT in their approach to telehealth looked at how could they focus activity. I mean, the 10,000 flowers blooming is useful in some ways for experience, but is not useful when you're trying to expand services and roll them out at scale. So this was the kind of mechanism, the mechanics that SCT went through to identify which of the programmes that were on the go should be taken forward at a national level, which ones presented opportunities for that. And what they now have, excuse me, are 4 national programmes that are moving forward. This is just in the period up to 2012. 4 national programmes, stroke paediatrics that I've mentioned, mental health and long-term conditions, namely COPD initially. There's also a range of underpinning activities on the standards, thank you very much, standards agenda. Education and training, which I've made reference to already, again I see that as a crucial one in helping us move forward, and how do we keep that engagement going with various stakeholders, etc. Challenges immediately for us, we've overcome a lot I think on the way, but the more immediate challenges are that we need to coordinate our strategy much more effectively than we've done to date. We need to support championing and leadership from a senior management level and really look to see how Telecare and Telehealth can address some of the strategic priorities for practice. So very often pilot projects have been developed which are all very nice and all very interesting, but are not the issues that are being addressed that keep service managers awake at night, that keep our lovely directors of finance awake at night over how they're going to square the circle of investment in the future. So we need to make those links much more effective. And the project mentality still continues, and you'll have sensed some of my earlier frustration about that, so that we really need to look at this as a service redesign opportunity and start to do it at scale. Equipment and data integration, again, we've heard about. This is a worldwide issue. We need to be working together, I think, much more effectively across Europe and across the rest of the world to see how we address that. Too often, equipment's bought that sits in cupboards because it doesn't link up effectively with other bits of kit or with the call handling centres and the response centres that are out there. And that can't be acceptable in our environment where technology is becoming increasingly more and more a part of what we do and what we use in our day-to-day lives. So initially slow, but some significant momentum now gathering. As I say, huge enthusiasm still there from carers and practitioners. And although we do realise that technology, telehealth and telecare, are at different stages just now, I think the two are coming into sync now much more than they were previously. And we're now looking at the integrated care models and pathways that we heard Kent and Cornwall talking about this morning. So this is what it's looked like as a kind of phased approach. Phase one very much about, you know, what is this that we're talking about out there? How do we develop local expertise? How do we develop national expertise on that? And that took us probably about 3 years. We haven't cracked that, but we're a lot better than we were. The terminology people are familiar with. We're on phase two now, which is really looking at how do we bring it together much more effectively as strategic agendas. And I don't think that's about innovative technologies just now. That is about trying to make our service systems work together much more effectively. I know we've been trying to do that for a number of decades, but I think there are very real opportunities by way of how the data actually moves across systems that will join that together in a way that perhaps personalities and other conflicts have been there in the past. And what we're aiming to do then is develop a kind of robust platform on which we can start to look at some of the more innovative technologies and approaches as we move forward. But I think we've got to get the basic bread and butter right still first, and then it's something to move on from. Phase three over the next 3 years, the health and social care integration side, I mean, those are big priorities for, we've got an election coming up in May, but whichever party gets in or whichever kind of, we've got a coalition government just now, health and social care integration is seen as a very important part of where we move to. And we do need to do it at scale. Even although we've talked about 30,000 people expanded on the telecare side, we know that there has to be much more expansion than that to move us forward. So we've adopted an incremental approach to change. I know that others have adopted something quite different and that there is the opportunity for more disruptive change. I'm not sure we can do that where people's health and care needs are a fundamental part of what we do, but we may be forced to take a more kind of disruptive approach if the impetus doesn't step up somewhat, I think, over the next wee while. I've talked about us merging telehealth and telecare under a kind of single framework, but we will be doing that under NHS 24 from April in this year. And we're also looking at a joint governance framework which links directly and reports directly into our Cabinet Secretary for Health and Wellbeing, and also links to the agendas round about life sciences and enabling technologies, which takes us into the realm of the enterprise companies for us and much more closely aligned with industry and where industry is moving. Education and training, I've already mentioned a couple of times, but currently what we're working on is developing detailed proposals for that phase 3 of the strategy, which looks at this integrated health and care model along care pathways. Bit of a debate going on about whether it's under a kind of diagnosis heading or whether we're looking at, is it frail, vulnerable, older people who have a range of conditions. You know, so some language barriers I think still there round about health and social care and how they describe what they're doing, and actually they have a different remit. So how do we pull that together? And the need for the ongoing capture and review of experience in a way that I don't describe as research. I see this as very, and I'm sure there will be people that will argue me, but I see it very much as you need to make sure you have sufficient feedback mechanisms in place, that you can learn as you go and adjust as you go. You can't stop everything and wait on returns coming back. You need to be able to merge and change and shift as you're going along. So we think we've got fairly good evidence for good outcomes at this stage. good evidence for efficiencies and savings, but we know there are problems in that we've got intermediate care services out there, we've got all the different service offerings that I think someone referred to earlier on. Which of them's working most effectively than others? I think that will be different in different areas depending on different care models that they have. There's the big debate around about the savings, and that we know we do need to rank up. But my contention is, where would the Wright brothers have been today if someone hadn't just gone out there and done it? So I do think we just have to move ahead and start to generate the evidence if that's what others need, and start to kind of move ahead. And as I say, we're kind of prepared to do that and making plans for our way forward. Thank you very much.